Ashwin, let's just quickly check in with the Lok Sabha in case the bill has indeed been passed now or not. We're going to dip into the Lok Sabha as well, but joining us now is also Ashvin Parekh of Ernst&Young. Ashvin Parekh, we've had this conversation several times over on, will it be done, won't it be done, when will it be done, and it seems like it's finally been done.
Yeah. Well, I was very optimistic right from the very beginning. And the reason is very simple. If you look at the amendments, are mostly, in one major aspect, and that is to strengthen the regulator in regulating the sector. And therefore, there wasn't much of controversy, to be very honest, except some 3 or 4 clauses. One is, of course, the voting power, and the second is the M&A clauses. But otherwise, this was one of those amendments which has been discussed, debated for the last 7 years. But, all it is going to do is to enable the regulator to form regulations to have a sound banking system in the country.
So the big headline really, as far as the world is concerned, as far as the Indian banking sector is concerned, is that this amendment now paves the way for the Reserve Bank to get moving on being able to issue new bank licenses, which is something that the government was very, very keen on. Wouldn't you say that is the big headline from all of this?
It is. It is a substantially big headline. What will happen, perhaps, and which is the very underlying aspect of these enabling provisions. One is, all along we've maintained, as a sector, that the sector will require substantial amount of capital to really fund the growth, the economic growth that the country is looking at. Now, in order to do that, in order to really invite that capital or lead that capital into the banking system,
In fact, Ashvin Parekh, I'm going to ask you to hold on for just 1 second. Let's get you shots of the Parliament, because we understand that the banking bill has indeed been passed by the Lok Sabha. We told you the voting was on, and now the bill has indeed been passed. Sorry, continue, Ashvin. What were you saying?
So, therefore, the most important underlying part is the capital. And with the expansion of, let's say, the banking licenses now, which the regulator will be able to do, the comfort that is going to draw from out of the regulations, the amendment, is that he has more powers to really regulate the banks in regards their governance, in regards their practices, in regards, even their functioning for that matter. So if licenses are issued to new banks with a certain set of conditions, the regulator will be able to oversee whether those conditions have been properly fulfilled or otherwise.
Okay. Ashwin, just hang in there. I'm going to go across to our economic policy editor, Siddharth Zarabi, who's also been listening into the debate in Parliament. Siddharth, so finally, it's a done deal. It's been passed.
It's been passed, and clearly, as you will see from the key changes that have been approved, it's essentially 2 major things. One, the Reserve Bank of India now stands fully empowered to regulate, supervise, take over, supersede bank boards, and this is going to be a key step in the process for issuance of new banking licenses. And let me just add to some more news. What we are picking up from our sources is that the process of inviting new applications for banks in India is likely to start in the new year. If my information at this stage is correct, and this is subject to some correction and discussion, it is likely that the process for inviting applications could start as early as next January. The process will involve the setting up of a committee within the Reserve Bank of India, possibly one senior member of the Reserve Bank board, deputy governor, likely with previous experience in banking matters, could be the head of a committee that will vet these applications. There are some minimum eligibility criteria that are being discussed and looked at, including 500 crore as the minimum capital requirement. There is likely not to be any quota as far as the number of licenses that the Reserve Bank may consider and deem fit and proper to issue. But the key thing after the banking bill is what will happen next. And what we are picking up from our sources is that the action, a long-awaited action for at least many, many years now on the issuance of new banking licenses, could start as early as January. Shireen.
All right, could start as early as January. Ashvin Parekh, quick comment on what you've heard. Siddharth, just take us through.
Well, I mean, I would just react quickly to the timetable, that was just discussed. I mean, now that the regulator has the necessary powers, it's not strictly essential for him to rush the whole thing up. Entry into this sector, I mean, if it is going to be broad-based, if, for instance, business houses are to be admitted into the sector, or if, the existing NBFCs of different, activities are to be admitted into the banking system, let the regulator first frame the policy guidelines, clear guidelines on governance, and then announce the entire process. I mean, we know that by the time the process begins and people are admitted into that process and an approval takes place, the new banks will take at least between 1.5 to 2 years to start becoming functional. In which case, what is critical, what is important today, what has happened is that the regulator has got the necessary powers, Shireen.
Right. Just hang on for 1 second, Ashvin. Let me also go across to Lata. Lata joins us as well. Lata, we were just discussing what this really means now for the Reserve Bank to step up to what the Finance Ministry wants it to do, is speeding up the process of actually issuing bank licenses. What are your sources in the Reserve Bank telling you about that?
I think we are missing out one step which Mr. Parekh is talking about. Before a committee is set up, first the final guidelines have to be announced. What we have at the moment is only draft guidelines on which there is a lot of back and forth. So whether it will be a 500 crore minimum capital first, what will be the qualifications and constraints on the various entities, all that will be known only when the final guidelines are out, and therefore we have to wait and see. I think Reserve Bank is ready with the guidelines, and they were only waiting to be empowered by law to be able to supersede boards, to ask for the books of any of the associate committee companies. They were waiting for these powers, and now that it has been passed, and the moment the other house also passes the bill, I'm sure the final regulations will be put on the website, and then we can start contemplating on who are the likely candidates. At the moment, we only have draft guidelines with us, so that will be the first step. It won't take too long because they are ready almost to a T. The next step will be setting up of a committee where, as Siddharth was saying, some people with former experience in the banking department of the Reserve Bank, or very eminent bankers, public person. I wouldn't be surprised if a former RBI governor is also called to choose from the contending parties, and then ultimately the licenses will be given out. And by the time they set up, it would take, of course, a pretty long time. I'm not very sure if it will happen even in Dr. Subbarao's time. Do you think, Mr. Parekh, that setting up passing the final guidelines, setting up the committee inviting proposals, and then vetting them and giving the license would happen within Mr. Subbarao's regime itself?
Well, no, I mean, what seems to be happening, I mean, if we look at the kind of response that we received, for example, way back in 1992, Lata, Shane, then what may happen is, this time around, perhaps, there may be more number of people who may aspire, to put a banking kind of organization. Now, in which case, the committee will have to really take each and every application, to begin with the guidelines, then thereafter the formation of committee, then thereafter vetting each and every application, making sure, that all the necessary conditions which are laid out are all met to it. So
estimate up to September or October is likely? You think only end of calendar 13 we should be getting the first list of successful candidates?
Exactly, and I wouldn't really worry too much about it. I would rather that we take time and we make sure that the right constituents or the right people are admitted into the system, basically,
Fair enough. So you would think, how many? Do you think they'll give more than half a dozen licenses or even that many?
Well, actually the issue is capital, and therefore I'm not seeing too many. I'm seeing those who are in a position to bring in substantial capital. So I can't expect more than 4 or 5, to be very honest.
Okay. Shireen, so that really looks like the timetable. It would take until the end of calendar, one would think, going by the past processes. And the fact that this time corporate groups have been included as likely candidates, that was not there last time around. It was only individuals who were called. So it would be a longish process, to be sure.
Well, if the Finance Ministry has its way, Lata, and this is what we get from very, very highly placed sources in the Finance Ministry, they want this process to be as quick as possible. But as Mr. Parekh and as you were pointing out, due process will need to be followed. First and foremost, we need to see the final guidelines being issued by the Reserve Bank of India. But Siddharth,